And good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saturday Night Live and Rambling. I'm Clay, joined by the lovely, sweet, kind, generous, warm, even took a bath today, E-Train.
What?
So we're glad to be with you.
No.
Hope you've had a good Saturday. We're getting a little rain here. Obviously, I think it's now a named tropical storm, Debbie.
Debbie.
Yeah, we'll hit Florida probably tomorrow, be here in a couple days. So I don't think this is necessarily associated with her, but we'll probably have a lot of rain this week, which I'm not complaining. We've been so short of rain, it's nice to see it again. Ellen is broadcasting from one of our various studios around the world.
I am.
And that background effects you hear is probably Chunk, the well-known bodyguard.
I might have to kick him out because he's starting to be because Toulouse didn't want to come in here with me. And yeah, okay. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna go ahead and let him go see his mama.
Okay. Well, I hope you've all had a good week, good Saturday. Kind of a busy night tonight. We're going to start off talking about, actually, I probably need to put my earplugs in. I keep forgetting them. We're going to be talking about a number of different topics. Might be enough more than I can do. But we're going to start off talking about Bitcoin. What's going on with Bitcoin? It's obviously had a pretty active month. Hello, Melissa. Good to see you. Then we're going to, talk about the candidates. Obviously, been a lot of shifting in politics going on the past week or two. Some pretty big events there. So we will briefly talk about, review their positions on matters pertaining to finance and that impact the economy, and try to give you a little bit background in that regard. And then we'll talk about the market and what I think is probably having a pretty big influence on it. Something called the yen carry trade. So I'm not sure if many of you have heard of it or familiar with it, but we will try to kind of shuck that down to the cob and detail it to you.
Now here, I thought it was the jobs numbers that just came out.
A lot of people think it's the job numbers. I think there's more to it. I think there's a more to the story.
Y'all got to forgive me. Like Clay said, I'm in one of our locations around the world broadcasting, and it's hot. So I do apologize, and I'm not used to this environment. So,
hello, Sky. Coming to you from beach at Lac May.
Women, I'm assuming. I took some French.
Maybe. Yeah, I never took French, but I never learned how to cuss in French either. French is just not a good language to cuss in. Greek and Russian are far better.
Possibly.
So good seeing y'all tonight.
Oh, look, I can sit back. I usually am on a stool. This is nice. I'm digging it.
The Grand Lodge near Mount Tremblant.
Tremblant.
Isn't that what I said?
Sure.
Where is that?
Sounds like you're on a vacay, and that must be cool. Sorry.
A little jealous.
I'm going to fidget a bit.
That's all right. Well, tonight, kind of kick things off. I would say welcome to the end of July. It was a big month for, a lot of major events, and kind of set the stage for a nice August bang. Oh, I should have known. Montreal is French. Duh.
Canada, remember?
Yeah, well, just Montreal. The rest of it is, no, wait. Yeah. Quebec is more French. The rest of it is English.
I'll take your word for it.
More British. Well, hope you are enjoying it. Hope it's
and I can't
pretty
believe
up there.
I can't believe you're watching this on vacation. I mean, I'm just saying.
I would
And
watch it
God
on
bless you.
vacation.
Of course you would.
I think everybody ought to watch it on vacation. I think we're a great vacation watch.
Okay.
But there's a lot of things to cover, so let's get into it. We saw the markets kind of stall around the middle of July. Like I said, it was kind of a big month. Biden dropped out of the race. You had Trump's attempted assassination. You have all the mess at the Paris Olympics. Anyone want to go swim in the what's the name of the river in Paris? It's like
La Seine, the Rhine, the Rhone, the La Seine? No.
Seine.
Yeah.
It's like a sewage dump, and they're having the swimmers swim in it. Some of them, after they were swimming it, were on the side puking.
Really?
It's just,
I didn't see
yeah,
that.
yeah, it's just gross. So, yeah,
Same. Thank you.
kind of an interesting month. I thought, okay, thankfully July is gone. August, new start, new opportunity. And then you had Friday, second day of the month. You had the payrolls number come out. You had the markets crash, and the payroll was a bad number by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah. Now, many are convinced, kind of like Ellen alluded to, that the market dropped on Friday because of the payroll number. And I will say, I don't think that's a major cause or the major cause of the market falling, but we'll talk about that shortly. First, we'll take a look at Bitcoin. July saw it pop, and drop again from 53 to near 70, and then it's now back around to 62. Trump has stated he will create a Bitcoin reserve at the Treasury. I mean, like, what on earth? So what's going on? What's some indication, or do we have some idea of what will happen with Bitcoin, going down the road? Well, we just had the Bitcoin halving in last April the 20th.
Wait. How can Bitcoin have? It's not a stock. It doesn't have. How does that work?
Okay. Bitcoin runs on the block. Let's define a few terms here. Bitcoin runs on the blockchain, which is literally a digital link of transactions forming a chain. The transactions are all put into one block every 10 minutes, and that block is added to the chain. Mm-hmm. Last link on the chain. It's where it gets its name, blockchain. Now, to add those transactions, you've got all these computers around the world running the Bitcoin operating system, the Bitcoin core. What was that?
Just a little part of my setup that I had to kind of improvise on.
Let's not do that again.
Sorry.
Or at least warn me so I can take my ears out. So you have, 1 million, 2 million computers around the world running the Bitcoin core, the operating system. Well, that operating system automatically will run the ledger, download all the transactions, keep it updated, that kind of thing. So, and how is a block added to it? Well, all of these computers kind of compete. There is a problem, mathematical problem, that needs to be solved. And the one to solve it gets to add the block.
So, Clay, why does the mathematical problem need to be solved?
Because that's how you determine who gets to write the block.
Why do you have to write a block?
Of information. Who gets to collect the transactions and add the next block to the blockchain? The ledger.
Okay, so it is a ledger like you would have an account.
It's a ledger of accounts, yes.
Buying and selling the Bitcoin.
Yes.
Right?
Every transaction that occurs from every account.
And whoever solves the algorithm or whatever gets to add that next
block.
piece. Right.
Yes.
Sorry, trying to simplify a little bit.
And And whoever writes the block gets paid in new Bitcoin. Now, when Satoshi, started Bitcoin, it started in late 2008. For everyone that wrote a block, they earned 50 Bitcoin.
Wow.
Well, keep in mind, Bitcoin back then was a fraction of a penny, a couple of pennies. And so that was their compensation for running the system and using the energy to maintain the ledger and try to solve the algorithm. Well, Satoshi set it up so that every 4 years, that payment of Bitcoin is cut in half. And here on your screen, you will see what are known as the halvings. You've got November in 2012. The first number is the price of Bitcoin at that time. So this is 4 years after it began. The halving is roughly every 4 years. So it was at $12.40. And the payment was cut from 50 Bitcoin to 25. Do what now?
Is that like a consistent thing they do?
Yes.
Yeah, I know you said about every 4 years, but is it?
About every 4 years. So it was cut from 50 Bitcoin to 25. In 2016, it was cut from 25 to 12.5. So it's cut in half, hence the name, the halving. And this latest cut in 24 cut it to 3.12 Bitcoin. So if you today had a computer running the Bitcoin core and you got to write the next block, you were the first one to solve the algorithm, you earned the right to write the next block, you'd be paid 3.124 Bitcoin, or roughly $190,000, $200,000. So that covers your energy costs somewhat. Somewhat. Now, the reason I throw this up, and I'm going to leave this up, this little calendar of the halvings, is because that's kind of the interest. What has happened after the halvings? If we look at those periods following the halvings, for example, after November 2012, the hash rate, now I haven't defined the hash rate. The hash rate is kind of a measure of the complexity of solving the problem.
Real quick, Clay. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
You said July 9th, 2016, 532 cut to 12.5.
Yes. 532 was the price of Bitcoin, and the reward, the payment, was cut from 25 to 12.5. It was cut in half. So I'm just giving that the price of Bitcoin at that time and the half amount.
Or okay. I think I get it.
Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah.
And if any of y'all,
go ahead.
Yeah, if any of y'all, if I say something that doesn't make sense, ask a question. Seriously, that's Ellen's job to throw those up and keep me honest with the questions. So if something doesn't make sense, let me know.
However, living with this man, I hear more about Bitcoin and all this stuff than probably most people do. And I probably already asked him the questions. If y'all are having questions, I may know it just because, he talks about this stuff and teaches it. So if there is no stupid question, because this stuff is complicated.
It is. And it's not, some of the lingo is not part of the everyday, discussions. And so sometimes when I talk about it, I forget about that and I will use some of the terms.
Yeah, and literally, like when he first started talking about crypto and mining, I was like, "What? You got like little elves out there, like pick an axe at what? Like what is this? What is going on? I don't understand." So there are no stupid questions. Trust me.
Yeah,
I've already asked.
And mining Mining is the name of the process to try to solve the algorithm, because you would mine new coins if you're successful. Now, the hash rate, I mentioned the hash rate. The hash rate is kind of a measure of the difficulty of the mathematical problem that every computer is trying to solve. A computer will basically take all the transactions out there, they're stored in a temporary pool. And so it takes those transactions and encrypts each transaction using a moderately complicated process. Well, you take that encrypted number and then you encrypt with those transactions something called the nonce, number used only once. And the nonce will start off at 1. Encrypt all the transactions, including the nonce. You come up with a number. Well, if that's not less than the solution required for the problem, you do it all again. You take all the transactions, encrypt them, increase the nonce from 1 to 2. Okay. So it's this increasing the nonce. The computer that does that the fastest solves the algorithm, which gets increasingly tougher the more computers on the system. So hash rate is a measure of the difficulty of solving that algorithm, solving that problem. And it's also kind of a good proxy for the energy used, the number of computers in the system trying to solve the problem. So we talk about hash rate a lot. Well, after 2012, when the payment was cut in half, for a lot of the slower computers trying to solve the problem, they were spending more energy than what they would earn in reward based on the current price of Bitcoin. So they kind of shut down. And the hash rate drops. The hash rate dropped from about 18 to around 12 or 13 computations per second on average. Well, the algorithm on Bitcoin adjusts the difficulty. So if the hash rate starts dropping after 2 weeks, the algorithm simplifies the problem, makes it an easier problem to solve, because it wants a block written about every 10 minutes on average. So if that average starts increasing, the complexity, the difficulty is adjusted every 2 weeks. And that's reflected in the hash rate number. Now, when the Bitcoin payment is cut in half, that cuts the production of Bitcoin. That cuts the production of supply. Well, supply and demand still a law. As the supply is cut, demand, if constant or even increasing, which it has for Bitcoin, you'll see the price rise. So with the lower production of Bitcoin, with demand still increase, the price was going up. Within 6 months of the first halving, the price was $190. That's why I'm leaving this up. So you can see the 1240 at the halving. Within 6 months, it was $190. How about 2016? Bitcoin was 532 and the hash rate was about 1600. Same thing after the halving. The miners cut back, the hash rate dropped to in the 1300s. 6 months later, Bitcoin broke 1,000. A year later, it was 2,900. May 2020, Bitcoin was 8,600, round numbers. Hash rate was about 120,000. It dropped to 87,000. In 6 months, Bitcoin had risen to $37,000. A year later, it was $62,000. So that's a little history on the impact of the halving and the cutting of supply. Usually in the past, we've seen the hash rate drop. We've seen demand still increasing. Will demand, and we'll talk about, is or will demand increase. But even if demand is steady, we would expect 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, the price to be significantly higher. So at the April halving, Bitcoin was 64,000. The hash rate was about 728,000 exo. Is it exo hashes? Exo is, I think, 10 trillion hashes. So you see a lot of computers are working on this. A lot of calculations go into it. Well, after the halving date, again, we see miners backing out. If you look at this graph, this shows the drop in the hash rate. So it's down about 7-8%, which is relatively significant. At the same time, what do we see from the major companies, the major miners? One of them by the name of Marathon just spent $100 million, $100 million buying Bitcoin. And not only that, it is holding on to it. It is readopting its strategy to hold all mined Bitcoin on its balance sheet. Another major producer is called Riot. Well, Riot just spent $163 million to buy 33,000 computers to mine Bitcoin. That's kind of a signal. But even more interesting is the hash rate. Now, here in this chart, you've got the blue, that's the hash rate. And this is the hash rate in terahashes. Sorry, terahashes per second. So you saw it at the halving back in April, pretty close to 650 million terahashes. Well, it dropped down to about 550. Lately, the past month or two, it started to rise again. That's kind of a positive sign. The people who do the work are getting back into it. Now, people go, well, the price of Bitcoin really hasn't moved. It's kind of, if you look behind the details, you'll find some other interesting information. For example, over the past month, mostly in July, the German government sold about $220 million worth of Bitcoin. So they had collected Bitcoin and just dumped it over a 2-week period. So that was a pretty huge increase in the supply of Bitcoin. What kind of positives can we look at in terms of future increases in demand? Well, just the past few weeks, Australia, Thailand, Hong Kong, all approved Bitcoin ETFs, kind of like a mutual fund portfolio for investors on their security markets. ETFs lower the barrier to entry. You don't have to install Bitcoin. You don't have to go through all the encryption. You don't have to get a separate little wallet, all those kind of things. It's just like buying a stock. You get on your broker and you can buy the Bitcoin fund. So it lowers the barrier of entry for small investors and has the imprimatur of legitimacy attached to it. It conveys legitimacy that the government has approved this, so to speak. Not only that, you've got several countries that have made Bitcoin the legal tender or a legal tender in that country. El Salvador, Argentina, Venezuela is probably close to it. And you can expect more to be added over the next year. Now, as far as predictions, I don't normally do prophecies. My crystal ball is no better than anybody else's, but there are signs, very strong signs, pointing towards certain conclusions. For example, I would expect Apple to add crypto and particularly stable coins to its wallet. Looking at some of their recent hires and patents in both crypto and the blockchain suggests some significant offerings down the road. They're putting a lot of money in it. We've seen Bitcoin being used in commodities, particularly oil, with several successful pilot programs. Countries who hate the U.S. dominance, the U.S. dollar dominance, and its weaponizing of the dollar are considering using Bitcoin to circumvent the U.S. dominated financial system. They don't have to exchange money using the electronic transfer programs like SWIFT that are largely controlled by the U.S. They don't have to do it in the dollar, which they want to get away from. They just really haven't been able to agree on what other currency can be used. So Bitcoin is kind of rising to the top. Particularly those who might see restrictions placed on electronic transfers by the U.S., a lot of them will adopt Bitcoin. Bitcoin has even surpassed gold in its market cap. It is being increasingly viewed as a safe haven asset, driving ETF investments. I want to say RIP gold. Okay, maybe a little premature on that. But think about it. The reason we have such a failed monetary system, I'll even say global monetary system, because it's not just the US. Inflation, the money purchases less and less, government debt is just absolutely blowing up, is that we have created a system that's basically papered over gold. And gold has some severe defects. It's not portable. It's not verifiable. You can't show me who owns a piece of gold if you just walk in. Is it just possession is, 10/10 of the law? Its purity. Is it 99% gold? Is it 60% gold? Is it fool's gold? Its purity can't be observed or ascertained easily. You actually have to destroy a part of it to test it. It also can't be used for immediate global settlements of transactions, financial transactions. Centralized authorities, various governments, central banks who, maybe keep it on reserve to create that impression that, there is some gold backing, even though it's not official, have used it to establish a system of leverage and hypothecation. Hypothecation is a fancy word for pledging collateral for a loan. Like, I may use stock and use it as collateral for a loan. That stock has to be hypothecable stock. It has to be widely traded, well recognized, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just pledging collateral for a loan. And in our system, our current financial system, that goes on a lot with repos, reverse repos, fiat lending. You deposit, $1,000 at the bank. The bank can end up through the process of lending, getting that money back as a deposit, lending, et cetera, et cetera. It can end up creating 66,000 in new money, so to speak. Money printing. We'll just put it that way. And the abuse of that ability to print money by the government has completely devastated the working class, devastated the middle class, robs them of a better future. It can't be the dollar and the euro, the ruble, whatever, cannot be used to store value over time. If you take your money and put it in a coffee can just to try to keep it safe, a month, 6 months, a year, 5 years from now, it's going to purchase less than it does now due to the rapid growth of inflation. Cannot be used to store value over any length of time. Bitcoin is immune or a solution to all of that. The way I think of it is gold is a archaic analog version of sound money, kind of like the rye stones. If you remember, I don't know, a year ago, year and a half ago, I talked about what is sound money, and I used the example of the rye stones in the Pacific Islands. Well, the dollar is the analog version of sound money. Bitcoin is the new digital version of sound money, offering better, well, everything. It does everything better. Now, states, some states, Texas, Wyoming, a few others, have enacted blockchain-friendly laws, which are laying the groundwork for those state investment funds, the pension funds, et cetera, to diversify into Bitcoin, primarily as a hedge against inflation. Now, Bitcoin is volatile over the short term, but you look at it over most any 2, 3, 5, 10-year period, it's done well. It's more than held its value against inflation. Also, some other things make me think the future for Bitcoin is extremely bright. AI, a lot of talk about AI, its growth, its future application. Well, AI will be offering and trying to figure out better ways to do things. And I kind of think AI will increasingly demand Bitcoin. Just think about it. Is it more efficient? Is it lower cost? Is it quicker? Is it safer? China pretty soon is going to have to unban Bitcoin. They've tried to ban it, shut it down 3 times. There's still huge miners in China. But as far as the civilians using it, no, it's kind of been banned. But they're going to have to unban it because they're going to start using it for commodity purchases, oil purchases. So, kind of there you have it. Digital currencies are coming, whether we want them or not. I like the aspect of holding cash in my hands, and Bitcoin gives us the ability to do both. And I think that's probably the best of both worlds. I can hold cash for short-term emergencies. I certainly wouldn't hold the dollar long-term. But, hurricane comes. I probably want to take some cash out of the bank and hold it while the hurricane passes through and the after effects are measured out or known. If you lose power, grocery stores, whatever, you can't use your credit cards, you need cash. So that kind of thing. Got a comment here from Melissa. Sorry. Isn't Bitcoin the guy you said disappeared? The Bitcoin guy. Yeah. Satoshi is the guy who, or the pseudonym of the guy who developed the Bitcoin, wrote the paper. The white paper was published back in 2008. Some people think it was a group of people due to some of his knowledge and insight into cryptography. Some people think he possibly was working for the NSA. Some of that makes sense to me. I've got actually a backstory on some analysis of the guy and his background. Maybe I'll have another night just purely on crypto and what it is, how it works, and some of the basics, how it got started. And I'll I'll talk about that then. Because crypto is becoming increasingly a topic of discussion. Jane, Bitcoin will never happen where I live. Ellen can tell you they won't even take credit cards. No, like I say, I hope it can be kind of a dual system. Kind of the best of both worlds. Because, you know, if electricity fails, if it goes out, it's going to be hard to do much with Bitcoin. But as long as that doesn't occur, Bitcoin is a better alternative. If you're traveling and you need money internationally, Bitcoin is a better alternative. If you're a large institution and you want to transfer $1 million, 10 million, $1 billion, Bitcoin is a better alternative. You can do it faster and cheaper. Jane, most people where I live choose not to have electricity. Yeah, there are always going to be some people that don't want to use Bitcoin. I've got, some friends that are still scared of it. Some people think it's a Ponzi scheme. And that's okay. Everybody is responsible to do what's in their own best interest. Reason we do this show and talk about some of the stuff is, try to give out information to help people make better decisions. But the one thing we encourage continuously is that everybody do what is in their best interest. And, I can't be the judge or determiner of that. And, some of it is just, like I say, some people don't feel comfortable with it. And I kind of understand that. More power to you. But for those who are engaged in significant financial transactions, travel, moving money, Bitcoin is going to increasingly be in the conversation going forward. The demand for Bitcoin is only going to increase. Like I say, I don't normally do prophecy. I'm not really doing prophecy here. There are just so many trends, so many things pushing it. I don't see any other alternative reasonably, barring the world going back to the Stone Age.
Hey, sorry.
Hey, welcome back. It's okay.
No, I know. Sometimes you just have to do things to protect yourself from people that, yeah.
That's okay.
Sorry.
Just not a problem.
Okay.
So anybody have any questions? Does that make sense? Is there something that, any questions I could answer? Be glad to. Now, while you're mulling on that, the second topic of the night is kind of political perspectives. And really not going to delve into politics or the character of the candidates. I'm pretty damn sure we would have a fairly significant amount of divergence in opinion. And I kind of enjoy that, but, probably not the time. We really don't try to stay away from politics, try not to delve into politics too much. But we might make an exception here or not. We're facing an election with two very, very different candidates. And so we thought it helpful to try to review their major economic, financial history, positions. And so that's what we'll do.
Because that's the most important thing, is to know someone's policy.
Yeah. And how will that policy impact you?
And Melissa, yes, I actually just told Clay tonight, I was like waiting to do another video on Bitcoin. and the creation of it and exactly what it is and how it became to be and all those good things. So I think we're going to do that maybe soon.
Yeah, we can probably do it next Saturday.
Okay.
And we'll just start off with the basics of Bitcoin and then look at a few of the other cryptos, what's good, bad, or different about them. But we'll just focus on how it all got started and why, and how, the basics of how it works. All right, start off with Trump. He's the better known. His economic policies were on display for years. What a lot of people don't know is that part of that success was due to, for example, he cut 18,000 employees from the executive branch. He was unsuccessful getting any other budget cuts, even foreign aid cuts through Congress. And he wouldn't shut down the whole government, so he generally accepted Congress's budget bills. The first 3 years, he kept the debt to GDP, government debt to GDP ratio about the same, somewhere around 104, 105%. But then COVID hit. And he signed stimulus bills equaling about $3.5 billion, all of which was funded out of debt. Now, some of those bills he actually argued against. Trump railed against the second or third one. I think it was a $900 billion relief bill, quote unquote, and a $1.4 trillion government funding bill since Congress approved it. It's the one that paid everybody $2,000 checks.
Mm-hmm.
But on Sunday evening, after being days of lobbied by a number of people, he decided to sign the bill. Otherwise, on Monday, the government would have shut down. He decided to sign the bill and not leave office. This was at the end of December 20. So he decided to go ahead and sign the bill and not leave office amid a storm of controversy and, people unemployed, expired benefits, no government checks being issued for anybody, and a government shutdown. That's why presidents are reluctant to try to shut down government in order to get Congress to compromise on the budget, because the president will likely take all the blame. Some of other Trump's policies, he cut taxes, income and corporate taxes, and this has been the subject of a lot of debate or discussion. But the facts are clear based on IRS data in terms of who benefited from the tax cuts. For example, filers with an AGI. AGI is adjusted gross income. Adjusted gross income of $15,000 to $50,000 a year. They got an average tax cut of about 16%. With 50 to 100,000 got about 15%. And filers with 100 to 500,000 got about 11%. So the lowest bracket of taxpayers got 16, 17. The next bracket, 50 to 100, got 15 to 17. Filers with 100 to 500 got 11 to 12. Those with 500,000 got at most 9%. And those with $1 million or more, the most was 6%. Some of those even paid more in taxes, depending on how, where their income came from and their type deductions. So after the cuts, the earners in the upper income brackets paid an even larger slice of the income tax revenue. So the bills definitely resulted in taxes becoming more progressive, which means the more income, the more of the tax burden you bear. Sky, would you put more than 5% of your assets into Bitcoin? I mean, that's kind of a personal choice. I do have more than 5% of my assets into Bitcoin, but um, you know, it's not the way necessarily it started out. It has just grown so fast. And it depends on what time frame I was looking at. If I wanted to buy a house in 6 months, would I put it in Bitcoin? Probably not. If I wanted to retire in 5, 10 years, 20 years, would I put it into Bitcoin? A big chunk of it, yes, I would. So,
Wait,
but
which
that's me with my risk tolerance. Yes, ma'am.
which Bitcoin? Would it
Well,
be Bitcoin
Bitcoin is
itself?
actually the coin.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I didn't
yeah,
know if you meant like crypto or.
yeah. I've got 3 different positions: Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana. There's 2,000 different coins. I think most of them will die off. Of course, people are always creating new coins, but looking for ones that will endure, that offer significant advantages to the others, those 3, one of those 3.
Well, how do you, there's so many of them. How do you determine which one is a good one to invest in? Because I've heard even my, excuse me, my dental hygienist was like, oh my God, my husband has like all of them, like all the little ones. And I'm like, well, that's, chances are they aren't going to do anything.
Chances are, the little unknown ones are a gamble, maybe even a high risk gamble. I mean, if I'd have bought Bitcoin at a tenth of a cent, I could have put $100 in. Let me back that up. Let's say I just bought $1 worth, just for simpler math. At a tenth of a cent, I get 10 for each penny. So 100 pennies, I bought 1,000 Bitcoin for $1. 1,000 Bitcoin right now would be worth $60 million. That's what people are kind of hoping for with these unknown, small, new coins. In all reality, I think the chances of any of those ever, mounting to some success are virtually zero. And it's just absolutely throwing money away when you've got very good alternatives like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, which will reasonably over the next 5 years outperform most other asset classes. My opinion. Not offering anybody investment advice. Okay. Just giving you my thoughts, kind of what I would do or done in my position. I'll share with you what I do and what I've done. That doesn't mean I necessarily would recommend it for you or anyone else. So Trump would cut taxes. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Melissa, how did they get to be worth so much money? Well, what interested me first got my interest. I saw a digital coin. There've been a lot of different digital payment systems. Some of them Bitcoin actually built off of. Bitcoin stole certain components and pieces of 5 or 6 other systems. But they all failed because they all had severe problems. Well, Bitcoin pretty much addressed those problems. Bitcoin, a lot of the new coins will have an unlimited supply. So if you have an unlimited supply, that can be very, subject to inflation. Bitcoin has a fixed supply. There will never, ever be more than 21 million Bitcoin in existence. And, that's the process of the halving. The final Bitcoin will be issued sometime in 2040. We don't know the exact date, But at 2040, 1/10 or 1/100th of a Bitcoin will be issued, and that'll be the last one.
So it's supply and demand.
It's supply and demand. Bitcoin addresses a lot of needs. It's verifiable. It's easily transacted. It can be relatively instantaneous transactions. It's not subject to any government regulation or limitation, which was actually the first thing that caught my attention. I grew up, in the 70s and 80s. We were kind of private. We didn't like people bugging our house. We didn't like the government bugging our house and knowing everything we were doing. Nowadays, people go out and buy the bugs and put them in their house for the government. If you carry a phone around, you're being listened to all the time. If you have a computer with a mic and a camera, you're being listened to and watched all the time, even if your computer is off. I will cover up my camera. I will physically disable the mic so it's not on unless I plug one in and use it. But that's just me.
I get what you're saying. That's not helping me at the moment at all.
Sorry.
It's all right.
But that idea of privacy was big to me. And I thought that was very attractive, not only to me, but to millions and millions of others. So that's when I started buying it. I really didn't know about the full operation. I didn't know everything about the design, et cetera, et cetera. I just thought that was an idea that would be extremely attractive to a lot of people over time. And it's been that plus some. Sky, won't the government intervene and regulate Bitcoin to protect the public? Government can't control it. It is not run on any government system or any one public system. It's 2 million computers around the world. That's one thing that makes Bitcoin so safe. If you have your bank account, if you have a savings account with a bank, there is one main computer that bank has that has your data on it, all your personal data, has your account and the money's in each account. If somebody hacks that, and it happens often, they get all your personal data, your social security number, date of birth, etc. You get all that data. Plus, they can move your money around. They can steal your money off your computer. Can't do that in Bitcoin. The design of the system, the fact that it's being run on 2 million computers simultaneously, there is no program, no government, no other computers in the world that can simultaneously hack and alter 2 million other computers at exactly the same instant. The way the system works is each computer is called a node. And if the ledger, the blockchain in one node differs from the other nodes, it is automatically kicked out of the system. It's not given a chance to repair. It can't update any other computer. It can't add any other transactions. It's automatically rejected out of the system. So not only does Bitcoin use a very extensive, almost exhaustive cryptology system, it punishes anybody that tries to hack with it. Kicks them completely out of the system, and everything they have is lost. So it's a very severe penalty for potential hackers. The only way it can be hacked is if you give somebody your 26-digit passkey code. It's virtually impossible to hack that unless you write it down and give it to somebody. That's what makes Bitcoin so safe. Every transaction is verified. Every transaction is seen by everybody else. But what is seen are encrypted numbers. So you see one Bitcoin going from this 36-digit number to this 36-digit number, and you have no idea who that is because that number changes. A new key is generated with each transaction. But you can see every transaction and you can track every coin. But you don't know who that account belongs to or where it's based or their social security number. You don't need any of that to set up a Bitcoin account. And that's part of the coolness of it. And that's why governments hate it, because they cannot control it. They cannot limit it. Now, what they can do is limit your transfers from your bank to Bitcoin. But you can use Bitcoin to buy oil, diamonds, other currencies, whatever, the government won't be aware of that, can't stop that, can't control that. Yeah, I can use Bitcoin to buy a car now. Tesla takes Bitcoin. Amazon, I think, takes Bitcoin.
Don't some ATMs take Bitcoin?
There are Bitcoin ATMs out there. You're not going to be able to withdraw $1 million from the ATM, but if you want, $500, you can get it fairly quickly. So that's why governments hate Bitcoin and are trying to come up with their own digital currency, because they can control that digital currency. They cannot control Bitcoin. And they have tried. China has banned its use 3 times. And, tons of people in China are still using it. So hope that answers your question. Let's see. Trump, better known than candidate, cut taxes. Trump also used tariffs to try to obtain more equal trade status for American companies. A good example is Macron of France wanted to implement a 25% tariff on imports of American technology. That would have been quite a bump. Well, Trump literally called Macron and said he would put 100% tariff on French wines starting that night if he didn't pull the tax. The French dropped the tariff immediately. So Trump's use of tariffs was largely to create and keep free trade. They were also used with China for a different purpose.
That's what I was going to say, yeah.
Now, many, argue against tariffs, said they would have caused inflation, particularly because we import, 20, 30% of our goods from China. But it didn't. And they ignore that. They completely ignore that. And the reason that those tariffs didn't create more inflation was primarily the Chinese government, the Chinese companies ate the cost of the tariffs. They
also, because I used to do business with them, they ate the cost of the shipping too to America.
Yeah. So it cut their profits. It cut their capital reserves. They at the time couldn't afford the loss of exports. So they ate roughly 80 to 85% of the overall cost of the tariffs. So the American consumer didn't notice much of any change. In addition, the implementation of those tariffs started the great migration of manufacturing companies out of China. And opening of plants, elsewhere in Indonesia, in India, and even in the U.S. Several semiconductor plants have tried to move to the U.S. Another big problem with China was that China was demanding the intellectual property, demanding the designs of the product, the manufacturing process information on the products before they would allow sales. That's how China got a lot of its intellectual ability and information. They forced American companies to give it to them if they wanted to sell in China. So Trump used the tariffs to stop that. Now, obviously, it's been reinstated, and it's where China gets a ton of its intellectual improvements from. But, the tariffs. So Trump would reinstitute some tariffs. He's also proposed a couple of new ideas. One would be to eliminate tips on low-wage employees from taxation. So don't tax tips. So if you're a server, bartender, if you're a Uber driver, hairstylist, whatever, tips would not be taxed. And it really wouldn't be a huge loss in taxes for the government, because I think there's a fair chance that some of those tips don't get reported. But it would also help the service industry cut record-keeping costs. When that was implemented, they had to start keeping track of everything they could and report it and do, 1099s, et cetera. So it would save employees some money. It would save the company's record-keeping cost. And it would pretty much all go towards people in generally lower income brackets. Another thing Trump recently proposed was eliminating the tax on Social Security payments for retirees, people on fixed income. For those really struggling to pay their bills, this could be huge. As far as the tax impact, not sure, because I'm not real clear on whether it includes, like people receiving spousal benefits, people receiving disability, so other things. So,
let me ask,
to the individuals, it'd be huge.
Let me ask you this. There are a lot of policies that people, and I'm going to ask you this about Kamala too, that people think are dangerous to the United States. Can you enlighten us on some of those? Like that he wants to be a dictator, or that whatever, there's lots of pushback on both candidates.
Yeah, I'm willing to listen to anybody that has a policy that he's advocated or, did in his prior 4 years that was harmful to the republic. He cut regulations by about 1/3, which was huge. It was actually a huge benefit to the economy. He was just in Atlanta and met with a roundtable of Black entrepreneurs, and they were all talking about how some of these regulations, particularly like the new green regulations, were choking them to death. Farmers are getting clobbered by some of the new green regulations. It's forcing a ton of them out of business. So, cutting regulations helps business, particularly small business, a ton. Like I say, he cut the executive branch by 18,000 employees. So if you have a government official that makes government smaller, that makes government more responsive to the taxpayers, that cuts the government burdens, both in taxes and regulation, on the citizens, I just have a hard time seeing that as being oppressive. To me, government oppressing people is doing just the opposite.
Well, there's, the fact that he doesn't want to have schools teach, or have a interest in or push critical race theory.
See, one thing I like is that he would shut down the Department of Education.
Well, I didn't, yeah. I mean,
public.
I had the critical race theory thing I have because my kids didn't know the difference between, Joe Schmo and whoever until they were taught it in school.
Yeah, schools have just gotten, well, ever since the Department of Ed came into existence, public education's gotten worse. Performance has gotten worse. I just saw data that, for example, Blacks, I think, are impacted probably more by inner city schools and public schools. Less than 3% of blacks graduating, according to the SAT scores, are, qualify for pursuing STEM education: science, technology, economics, mathematics, the quantitative
Engineering.
sciences, engineering,
Yeah.
yeah. The quantitative, higher paying jobs.
Now, is that because they're not being taught the basics?
Yeah, absolutely. 66% of black graduates can't read at grade level. Can't read, write, read or do arithmetic at grade level. The performance of the public schools is utterly and completely atrocious. So the Department of Education has only added more bureaucracy, more expense. We spend a ton on schools. What we put into schools money-wise, the money going into schools has soared. Performance has dropped. Kids are far less qualified. In college, we used to teach higher critical skills. Now we teach remedial courses. It's a huge difference. So anyway, topic for another night. So what do y'all think about cutting the taxes on tips and Social Security? Good ideas?
Very good.
I mean, yeah, I kind of favor it. But I'm I'm pretty much an anti-tax guy anyway. I mean, the average family or the average worker makes, 35,000. The average household makes about 65,000. Two, 3 workers in a family. The average worker works the months of January, February, March, and most of April just to pay their taxes before they spend one dime on healthcare, before they spend one dime on housing, food, clothing, their family, taxes. I think that's obscene. And, the average individual taxes raised per individual are about 15,000 per taxpayer. I'm sorry, per individual in this country, are about $15,000 a year. So for a family of 4, that family of 4 contributes $60,000 a year in taxes on average. Yeah, how do you do this? Well, a lot of it is in your purchases, the corporate taxes. Corporations don't pay taxes. They collect them. So higher corporate taxes are passed through to the consumer as a cost, just like increasing labor, just like increasing rent, increasing raw goods prices. Those increases in cost are passed on to the consumers. The consumers pay them. And I think that burden has just gotten way out of whack.
It is, Clay, and I think that, the more, I know it sounds good, more corporate taxes, so you don't have to pay as much, but that's just absolutely the opposite of what the reality of it is.
Yeah. It comes out of your pocket when you buy food, when you buy clothing, when you buy cars. It comes out of your check.
Mhm.
In fact, studies show that employees in higher taxed companies make less than low tax companies. So actually the employees, as taxes increase, companies are struggling not to dig into their margin. And so it's reflected in lower salary increases. The research, not enough people are aware of that. We don't talk about that enough. In fact, I would prefer to get rid of withholding and just have everybody write a check to the government every month when they got paid. just like you
I
pay
don't,
for your rent, gas, whatever.
I just think that people who aren't taxed as much are more willing to help other people who need it by their own accord because they want to, instead of all these government assistance programs and all the money we spend as a country. It just seems like it would be the money would be better spent instead of regulating the the help me out. My words are I'm a little wonky tonight. I apologize.
She's got jet lag.
I've got something.
Okay.
Instead
Um,
of regulating the people who are giving the money to the people and all the bureaucracy and the red tape and all that, people who, make money are more likely to help people on their own. Does that make any sense?
yeah, it does. But to me, the problem is a little more acute than that. I think with so many people seeing government coming to the aid of people in distress or government programs being put in place to take care of this problem or this problem, people are increasingly looking to government to solve the problems in their community or with their neighbor. They are less and less likely to get out and try to help them on their own. It used to be it takes a community to raise a child. And, when I was a kid, I was running all around the neighborhood. I knew everybody. And if I was doing something I shouldn't be doing, somebody would chew my ass. And
Yeah, but you're a boomer.
yeah, but my dad probably would have been mad if they didn't. So the whole neighborhood was keeping watch on all the kids while they were out running around the neighborhood,
Well, where were
making
they when
sure
I
they
was
weren't
growing up?
doing anything insanely stupid.
Where were they when our Gen X's were growing up? Because they were just like, do whatever the hell you want to. We don't care. Just be home before the street lights come on.
Yeah. Yeah. Each generation has been a little different. Like I say, it kind of cycles. That book, The Fourth Turning, I kind of wanted to do it for book club, but it's only about that thick.
No, thank you.
It's a lengthy book. Could have really condensed it down to a few hundred pages, but nonetheless, it's got some great information and great ideas. How,
You could do like a chapter per month.
something like that. But it's good insight on how cyclical human nature is and the traits of different generations. Now, they may be expressed somewhat different culturally, but there's a lot of commonality in the basic traits that cycle every fourth generation. So you got the as boomers, we were more interested or concerned with production and possibly material things, pursuit of material things. You saw a lot of women entering the workforce in those years. There was a lot of wealth. The 80s created a lot of prosperity and wealth, and there was, money constantly flashing in front of you. So that was kind of a generational obsession, which I think led to more the latchkey phenomenon because the parents were out earning the bread. And then, your generation had certain issues. Hell, y'all the ones that produced Gen Z.
Millennials.
So,
No one
millennials
raised
and
us.
Gen Z.
We're still feral animals because we didn't know what we were doing. We were like, okay, how do we parent?
Yeah, I also want to take this moment and ask everybody to please like, do the YouTube things, subscribe on the video, help us grow the channel a little bit. I probably don't remind people enough of that, but we'd really appreciate it if you just hit that button and subscribe.
It doesn't cost y'all a thing, but it really helps us continue to bring all the information that hopefully you enjoy.
All right. So Trump, I think you know,
I'm gonna take a
he's
second.
got,
Excuse me.
sure, he's got innovative ideas, good, bad, or indifferent. He's, throwing stuff out anyway. So let's take a look at Kamala, a bigger unknown, at least to most people anyway. Now, this is despite her being a senator and vice president for the last 10 years. So, what are her policies, her economic financial policies? Easy for me to say, economic financial policies. She is very much the opposite of Trump. She believes in government, big government, government control. Government experts know better and can allocate resources better. She's actually politically further to the left than Bernie Sanders, who is a socialist. Now, some of the specifics she has argued for or voted for. As vice president, she's actually broken more tie votes. The vice president sits or can sit over the Senate, and if the vote's expected to be close, they'll usually join in. Well, if there's a tie vote, the vice president then gets the tie-breaking vote. And she has broken the tie 33 times over the past 4 years. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Some of those ties that she broke, she was the vote in favor of Sanders' 21 budget bill of nearly $2 trillion that called the American Rescue Plan. This is the plan that supersized the unemployment checks for tens of millions of people. I think we've shared the story of E-Train's daughter was dating a guy who worked 20 hours a week part-time. He's 17, 18 years old at the time and was making, I don't know, $200 a week. Well, once this plan kicked in, he started getting checks for $900 a week. Within a few months, he had saved, $8, $9, $10,000. His parents were upper middle class. He just put everything in the bank. That was irritating because I was paying for it. It also provided huge grants to the state and local governments for non-COVID projects, and we've seen good examples of how some of that was absolutely wasted. Now, the thing is about this bill, it was equally panned by economists on both the left and the right, who called it or described it as a bill that would cause significant inflationary pressure. The rest is history. Now, she also cast the deciding vote to confirm Jennifer Abruzzo as general counsel of the National Labor Relations Board, NLRB. Abruzzo went on to file a number of complaints, such as the one by Whole Foods, claiming that workers have a right to pursue political advocacy while on the job. When you go to a store or a company, do you want to be confronted by one of the employees trying to convince you of the correctness of their political position? Abruzzo would argue that the employees had every right on the employer's time, on the employer's property. She also authored a memo that detailed how student athletes in college were actually school employees and thus could unionize. So that ended up, having a relatively significant impact. She cast the deciding vote on Rohit Chopra as the director for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, kind of a nebulous little agency that actually has some big impacts here and there. He, for example, required lenders, banks to collect LGBTQ data from small businesses and is currently being sued by most every financial institution for unlawfully exceeding his authority. and bringing what they describe as capricious enforcement actions outside of the CFPB's, dictates. So those are just kind of examples that she favors big government controlling the private sector. She cast a deciding vote on the $1.2 trillion Inflation Reduction Act. If there was ever a poorly named bill in history, that was it. A year later, the average family or average individual was spending $800 a month more on expenses to maintain the same standard of living. Included in this bill was about $7.5 billion to build EV charging stations around the country. It's built 7 stations in 2 years. Now, the bill has been a boon to China, which has received more than $1 billion in additional orders for batteries, lithium-ion batteries, $1 billion per month. The bill also included $5 billion for electric buses. 3 years later, we have cities and school districts warehousing the buses. Here you see the California superintendent of a district stating the mandate could leave kids stranded, putting them at risk because so much of what the buses cover is out of the EV's range. So if they have to go to EVs, and California is actually mandating 100% EV buses, they can't pick up some of the kids. And that's not all. You've got cities who have bought electric buses. Just Asheville, North Carolina, bought 11 or 15 of them. 3 years later, they're all parked and broken and useless. Buses have been a failure most everywhere they've been tried. Other policies that Kamala supports, she strongly favored decriminalizing illegal border crossings. She wants free health care for all illegal migrants. In the past, she has raised funds for Antifa rioters, burning, trashing cities. She has argued for the abolition of private insurance. No more private insurance. She wanted a ban on new oil development and fracking. Now, last week, her staff sent out a memo that she had, quote unquote, changed her position on that. She's argued for it ever since she was in the Senate. Been very consistent. And she has not commented on it publicly. So make of that what you will. She wants to abolish ICE, which handles immigration enforcement and deportations. And in her words, start from scratch. A big thing that a lot of people don't know, or I guess maybe realize when she's saying it, she is committed to equity, not equality. And those are very different words. Equity means same outcomes. Equality means same opportunity. So what she's arguing for, and that phrase, that idea, that concept comes from Marx. She's arguing for government controlling the production and consumption aspects of the economy, communism, so that everybody has the same outcomes, realizes the same end. She also supports irreversible medical treatments on children. This would, this has been kind of in the news lately, kind of the removal of genitalia or altering of genitalia. It's irreversible on children. She supports reparations for slavery. She opposed Trump's tax cuts, and if elected, she would let them expire. She also wants to raise the top rate on individuals to 40% and increase the corporate tax rate from 21% to 35%. She would also greatly expand the estate tax, though she's not given specifics on that. Keep in mind, she opposed Powell for the Fed chair, and I know we've all been fussing at the Fed for the past year or two. But the reason she opposed Powell was because he wasn't dovish enough. And by dovish, that means he wasn't inflationary enough. She wanted somebody that would maintain an even softer Fed policy towards monetary expansion and spending and hence inflation. Now, she has proposed several tax credit plans, which didn't go anywhere. One of them she proposed was a $3,000 credit for unmarried workers, $6,000 for married workers. She proposed ending tax breaks on fossil fuels. Right now, energy companies can, if they set up a drilling rig, spend several $1,000,000, they get to depreciate that cost. If they strike oil, there's an estimate as to how much that oil is worth. And they get to kind of, let's just say, to keep it simple, depreciate some of that as they withdraw it. She would eliminate all that. She has proposed 100% tax on companies with excess profits, whatever that means. And she favors Medicare for all. She would eliminate private medicine and institute universal health care funded with a 4% income tax, which that would be the starting point. It would go up from there. So in other words, she's just a very, very strong advocate for using tax policy to shape society and culture to implement her policies. She's a very strong redistributionist and wants uniformly higher tax rates on everybody. So that's kind of a sharp contrast from Trump. And good, bad, or indifferent. Both candidates have their flaws. In terms of the impacts on the economy, I by nature am more of a free market kind of guy. And the reason I am is because I study history. And there's been no other system. I mean, the free markets, capitalism, has a lot of problems. At times, it can be an ugly system. But the reason I prefer it is because simply I have seen nothing that works better at lifting people out of poverty, improving living standards. And we've had great laboratories. This is not really an academic or a theoretical argument. We had great labs established after World War II. You had East and West Germany. You had North and South Korea. You had China and Taiwan. Each one of those had about the same infrastructure, the same degree of natural resources, except for Taiwan. It's just a big rock. It had zero natural resources. Same educational levels, system, access. So they were pretty much two separate labs. The difference was one set had free markets, the other had state control, big government control. Well, in each and every case, in each and every lab, the free markets produced higher living standards, better health care, better infrastructure, better upward mobility, more freedom. It wasn't even close. So whatever problems I may see with free markets, I just simply haven't seen anything that addresses those issues in a superior way. Now, a lot of people talk about socialism. We haven't really tried pure socialism. And I think about that. But real briefly, my response is bullshit. We've tried it over 100 times, and each and every time it's failed. It doesn't lift people out of poverty. It rather degrades the living standards so that everybody is equal, but everybody is miserable. And it's easy to build dependency on government. So you do get a number of people who, I guess, believe they can't do any better on their own. And so they prefer that kind of system. I don't. I don't believe that's ultimately in most people's best interest. Is it in some people's best interest? Well, particularly if you're the elite running things, they do really well. They live very high. Chavez down in Venezuela took office in, was it the mid 90s? He was just a poor farmer he died 10 years ago, and his daughter, inherited his money. She immediately was the richest woman in South America with a net worth of about $20 billion. Where did he get that from? And you look in our own government, people in DC, they go up there poor. Within a few years, they're millionaires. AOC couldn't even afford apartment rent when she first got there. She was sleeping in her office. A lot of newly elected reps have to do that, sleep in their office. Now she's got a net worth of, I don't know, $6, $8, $10 million in 3 years. That's damn astute investing. Anyway, hope that gives you some of the differences. And honestly, some of y'all may still favor Kamala. I'm a free market guy. I like lower taxes. I want the government off my ass and out of my wallet. But you may differ, and that's okay. That's the beautiful thing about this country, is we can have respectful and civil differences. So make the decision that's in your best interest, country's best interest. Any questions on any of this? I, again, kind of been hogging up the discussion. Stocks. Sometimes I want to say stonks. The stonk market. Interesting few days, generated a ton of publicity. Friday, everybody, I think, hopefully is aware of what happened in the markets. It was kind of an ugly day in all of the markets. And the markets have been dropping since mid-July. Now, Friday was obviously a big move, but what caused it? Was it just the bad payrolls report? I mean, I've been doing this show for months and giving you bad report after bad report and talking about, why these numbers are bad or inaccurate, and then they're revised. And it's like, yes, it was as bad as what I said. But in the past, when bad news would come out, the market would go up because bad news was seen as good news. The market has for so long lived off of the Fed giving it free money. By having basically zero interest rates, you could borrow from the Fed at 0% and, use it to buy assets and net the return. Well, the market is still hoping for a return to those days, or has been. And as such, if bad news was released, many in the market interpreted it as a sign that the Fed was that much closer to throwing out free money again. And so the market went up. And I was like, this is ridiculous. But they got so addicted to QE, quantitative easing, and the handing out of free money that Bad news was good news. Now, it appears that the market is finally starting to receive bad news as bad news. I want to cheer that because I like it when people react appropriately to reality bitch slapping them. But I'm not fully convinced that the market is really at that point yet. I believe there's more to the story. Now, before I get to that more of the story, good night, Sky. Appreciate you joining us and hope you have a great time on your mountaintop. Send pics. I'm sure it's beautiful. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate you. So let me digress for a second and talk about hedge fund managers, because understanding this is kind of critical to the rest of the story. Hedge funds, these are not really publicly available investments. You have to be what's known as an accredited investor, basically a millionaire with at least $100,000 to invest. So these hedge funds don't have to follow the rules that regular mutual funds do or have the disclosures that regular mutual funds do. For example, many of them may use leverage. For every dollar invested, they may borrow $5 or $10 or even $20. Have a leverage ratio of 20 to 1. Now, what that means is that for every dollar invested, they borrow $20, they invest that $21 into whatever asset they want. And if that asset produces only a 2% return, well, that turns it into a 40% return less the interest due on the loan and whatever fees are collected. So a lot of the hedge funds have more aggressive or complex strategies and are constantly looking globally for return, not just domestically. They look globally for return. Well, over the past few years, an opportunity arose to add a few points of yield to their portfolios, and a lot of them have taken advantage of it. It's called the yen carry trade. Yen, the Japanese currency, the yen carry trade. What is the yen carry trade? Well, the way it works is as a hedge fund manager, you basically take your millions or your billions and go buy Japanese bonds, Japanese government bonds. Now, you can, and I'm going to use this word again, hypothecate these bonds. Remember, I talked about how hypothecation is just pledging that asset as collateral. It's a fancy name for pledging it as collateral. So you use those Japanese bonds as collateral for a loan in Japan. You then take that loan money and use it to buy stocks in the US. Why go through all this convoluted process? Well, first of all, you got to understand transferring money internationally is easy now. Can be done quickly and very cheap. The opportunity for this particular strategy, though, lies in the fact that you receive interest on the bonds you buy. Okay? You lend the government the money, they pay you interest. So you receive that interest. Now, if you take these bonds and use them as collateral, you still own those bonds. You still receive that interest. But you hand over the bonds as collateral, you receive cash back as a loan. You pay interest on that loan. So you're receiving interest, you're paying interest. If the interest you receive is greater than the interest you pay, that's called positive carry. If you paid higher interest than what you receive, that's called negative carry. So in this particular case, the yen carry trade is taking their money, buying the bonds, pledging them as collateral, and having a positive spread. They're being paid more than they're having to pay. That's positive carry. That's the yen carry trade. Well, what do they do with this loan money that they receive, the cash that they receive on the loan? Well, they take it and invest it in American assets, American bonds, or American stocks. Generally has been more apparently stocks. So basically, these hedge funds are buying stocks and being paid to do so. There has been some slight coverage of this yen carry trade, not a whole lot. But this is one article. It was in CBNC, and it didn't really describe what the carry trade is, but it did kind of have this ominous warning how Japan's yen could be ripping through U.S. stocks. And so that got me to thinking. And I believe there's something to that. Now I'm going to digress a little bit for a second, give you a little bit more background. The key factor in this interest paid on the loan is two things: the domestic interest rate of the country the loan is based in, Japan, and the exchange rate, the yen to the dollar. How many yen can you receive for $1? So think of it as how many yen does it take to buy a dollar or a dollar worth of goods? If it takes more and more yen to buy the same dollar, then we say the yen is weakening. It takes more yen to buy the same dollar, the yen is weakening. If it takes fewer yen to buy that same dollar, then the yen is strengthening. And conversely, the dollar would be weakening. The dollar buys fewer yen. So over the past year, the yen has been weakening, falling, and the interest rates in Japan have been near zero. So this allows the dollar to buy more and more yen. So you can buy Japanese bonds with fewer dollars. Not only that, the interest rate you have to pay on that loan, if you pledge them as collateral, is very low. Particularly if the yen is continuing to weaken, the net effect of that rate is even lower. Costs you fewer and fewer dollars to pay it. So the yen denominated loans became cheaper than the interest stated on the government bonds. Now, throw in the BOJ, Bank of Japan. That's their central bank. We have the Fed, they have the BOJ. Well, this past week, the BOJ hiked rates. Japan right now is running about 3% inflation, which is terribly high for them. So the BOJ has seen the yen weaken over the past year and has tried some things to stop it, but hadn't been able to. As the yen weakens, that causes inflation to rise even higher, just like a weaker dollar would cause higher inflation in this country because it takes more dollars to buy Japanese and European goods, Chinese and Japanese and European goods if the dollar weakens. So the carry trade turns negative. BOJ hikes rates, hiked it by 0.25%, 0.25%. And turn the trade into a negative carry. And remember, with the leverage, even a slight loss is magnified. Small gains are magnified. Flip side of that same coin, magnified. So, the hedge funds are getting bitch slapped here when it turned negative. So the hedge funds who hypothecated to buy American stocks had to close that position. So to close that position, what do? They have to sell stocks. They have to sell the corresponding stock position, use that cash to pay off the loan. And boom, the market is crashing. Now, this is just an example, and I hope that made some sense. This is just an example of how interrelated investing is these days. you have to pay attention to what else is going on in the world because it can impact your wealth. It can impact your future. And hopefully that's why you watch this show is we do cover some of these things. Now keep in mind, like I say, Japan's inflation rate is 3%. Their interest rates were just increased by a quarter of a point, which is a huge deal because their rates were so low. Their rates have been near zero forever. I mean, more than a decade. And they announced, the Bank of Japan also announced that they're going to cut their bond buying in half because when they buy bonds, they are putting money into circulation. Follow the cash. More money in circulation, well, that's inflation. And so they're trying to cut inflation. So they hike the rates and they're reducing the money printing. So the hedge fund managers in this country are now selling the yen bonds, the Japanese government bonds, because they have a very low yield. There's no more positive carry. So they want their money out of those so that they can reinvest it in higher yielding American bonds. Now, as Americans sell Japanese assets, that actually increases the supply of yen in circulation and weakens the yen, lowers the value of the yen, which is what the BOJ is trying to fight. Well, now that let me show you this. This is a yen to dollar. So this is the number of yen to $1. 140, so right now it's at 146.72. You notice 5 days, sorry. You'll notice on the 30th, it was about at 155. And you can tell there have been, some pretty sharp drops. And then here you get this almost vertical crash and drop. Same day. This is the ending of the carry trade, which has been occurring over a few days. So what do the hedgers do? The hedge funds do with the cash that they've got? Well, they pulled out from the stock market and they see it dropping. They're thinking there's probably more of this that's going to occur. So they look for a safe haven. And what's the safe haven? Well, the main safe havens for most investors are U.S. Treasury bonds. And so here is the 10-year bond. And this is again, June 31st, April the 1st, April the 2nd. So this is basically a 3-day view. And you can see that the yield went from about 4.18 down to 3.79. That's a huge drop in bonds. And you can see this vertical drop here and here. This coincides perfectly with the drop I showed you in the yen. So this is kind of how we know that hedge funds are dumping the yen and buying bonds. Remember, bonds, the teeter-totter, price and yield. As you buy more of something, the price goes up, just like on a teeter-totter. Price goes up, yield goes down. And here's where you see the yields dropping sharply over basically a trading day and a half. Now, this is the 10-year bond, which is oftentimes a favorite, but it's in relatively short supply. And honestly, if I was a fund manager, I wouldn't want to go out this long, particularly at this yield, 3.8%. This is a taxable yield. After taxes, you're going to get 2.5%, maybe 3%. Well, inflation is running that at the, higher or at that level now. And if it starts up again, which is very possible, you're going to be in a money losing asset. You no, just no. So I would probably look more at a 3-month or 6-month treasury bill. And here's the 6-month treasury bill. And you can tell there's pretty significant drops in the yield, but this is all in one day. This occurred on the second. It went from 5.1 to 4.84, which, you think 15 basis points. Well, in the treasury market in one day, that's huge. That's pretty damn rare. So rates crashed in treasuries and in the yen at the same time. Cash fleeing Japan and being parked in modest safe havens in the US. So I talked about, these bonds having some risk due to inflation. Well, if you can get about 5% on a, 3-month or 6-month bill, even after taxes, that's very modest, if any risk. This is still 120 basis points, 130 basis points above the 10-year. But so I would, if I was a portfolio manager now, I would be preferring the shorter end of the curve. I just keep rolling over T-bills till I got conviction of what was going to happen in the future. I've already mentioned that a falling yen is inflationary for Japan, and the BOJ is trying to prop up the yen. So the BOJ was selling dollars and buying yen, which would weaken the dollar and strengthen the yen. It takes yen out of the market, out of circulation, and puts more dollars in circulation. So that was kind of the first step in trying to defend the value of the yen and weaken the dollar. Well, so some of the hedges saw this hike coming, and they started moving a little earlier, before the hike was announced, a day before, whatever, a couple days before. This has been trending for several days. Then the Bank of Japan announces the hike, and boom, the race is on. Now, this falling of the yen, this weakening of the yen, this hiking of interest rates poses huge problems for Japan. Their interest rates have been so low that when they increase them, it causes a huge change in the government's interest cost. Now, think about this for a second. Their debt to GDP is about 270%. So for every dollar in economic activity in the country, they have $2.70 in debt that they owe. That's a huge burden. The US, on the other hand, is around 130%, which is way high, stupid high. Japan's is just off the charts, but Japan's in a little bit different world because they have such huge domestic savings. We don't. Anyway, the increase in interest expense for the government if rates go up is huge. So this is a huge problem for the BOJ, for the Japanese government. Rising rates, hiking rates to fight inflation could kill them. It could double, triple, or even quadruple their interest expense. So now it gets even more interesting. Japanese investors, Japanese banks have over the past year bought a lot of American bonds because our yield's been so high. They've executed their own carry trades, so to speak. Well, the government and the BOJ doesn't want to keep printing money. They've got to issue a lot of debt. And if the BOJ doesn't buy the bonds, remember I said they were cutting their bond buying in half? If they don't buy the bonds, then that leaves it to the markets to buy. Well, the market's going to demand higher rates. which will force the government to pay higher interest expense. That's deadly to Japan. So the BOJ announced it's cutting its purchasing in half, but also has kind of issued instructions to Japanese investors and Japanese banks to support their country. It's their patriotic duty. So Japanese banks and investors will be selling US dollar denominated assets, US stocks, US bonds, in order to get the cash and buy Japanese bonds. So you've got what this creates is almost a perfect storm of carry trade investors selling US stocks, Japan's investors selling US stocks and bonds. And this will just cause one hell of a turmoil, potentially. Basically, you've got a ton of international investors pulling out of US markets who won't return quickly. It may take years or even a decade for Japan to fix things if they don't go bankrupt or crash before then. The size of these kind of trades, these carry trades, are unknown. I've seen estimates ranging from 5 trillion to 12 trillion or more. No one knows exactly how big or how it will all shake out. Remember, I said hedge funds don't have to disclose exactly what they're doing. You hear rumors, you get, about different companies, and you can kind of extrapolate from that, but it's all approximation. Nobody knows for certain. Nobody knows how it will all shake out, but I can pretty much guarantee it will cause shakes, potentially huge ones. Think about it. Think about the impact that a 0.25 a quarter of a point change in Japan's interest rate had on the US markets. The whole system, my point is the whole system is a hell of a lot more fragile than we may imagine. We as a market and as an economy are extremely sensitive to global events. So what's going to happen? I can't precisely say. It wouldn't surprise me to see the markets rise early next week for a few days and then resume the fall. It wouldn't surprise me to see them continue the crash. There's just so much uncertainty and so much unknown. It's really hard to predict. And I've always taken uncertainty to mean risk. So when I say things are unknown, things are uncertain, consider that higher risk. And if you want somebody else's opinion, how about Warren Buffett? Over the past 2 weeks, Warren Buffett has sold the hell out of Apple and BOA and some other stocks. His cash position has risen to $277 billion. It's all in short-term treasury bonds, bills. He is the largest holder in the world now of treasury bills, even more than the Federal Reserve holds. $277 billion. So, consider consider that another opinion on the potential of the market. I wanted to throw this up quickly just because, one, I think it's a beautiful picture. I mean, just everything, the gardens, the green, the lighting, the building itself, the sunset in the distance. But this is also kind of sad because, we've talked about commercial real estate, CRE, several times, and the crisis in commercial real estate. A lot of people think it's only in office buildings, in vacancies. But it's not. It's also extending to vacation and hospitality real estate. This is the Greenbrier Hotel in West Virginia, and it was just put up for auction because of default on the loan. So you've got property with this much money, prime property, declaring default. going bankrupt. Bankruptcies have risen to subprime crisis levels, as we talked about Tuesday. There's a lot going on, and not much of it is good. Chaos is coming. So, hope that helps. Hope that gives you a little bit better information on what's going on. In terms of the stock market, obviously the jobs report didn't help, but I think because of the downward trend that was going on for days before, that there's more to it than just one jobs report. But now, caution and awareness has kind of hit a lot of investors. Will they be trying to pull out money to, get in some safe haven? We'll find out in 36 hours. But, like I've been recommending for weeks, I still would be very cautious about investing. There's a lot of uncertainty in there. So kind of keep your powder dry. It's not investment advice. That's just what I'm doing. And that's the best I can share with you. Anybody have any questions, comments, thoughts, loves, hates, passions? Any pet pictures you want to share with everybody? Well, that's about everything that I had for tonight. I hope, you find this somewhat informative. Again, hope it's information that you can use. If you think about it and something doesn't make sense later, please email me, moffatonmoney@gmail.com, or DM me on Twitter. If you're not following on Twitter, give me a follow there also. I appreciate y'all joining us tonight. Love you guys. Y'all are great. Melissa, thank you. And I wish you all a great rest of the weekend. And we'll look forward to seeing you Tuesday. Oh, one other thing before you go. Movies. We had some movies proposed Tuesday. So I wanted your guys' reaction to, which 5 or 6 should I put up on the poll? The ones that have been suggested so far are Mr. Magoo's, and if you will, just type out 2 or 3 of your favorites. Mr. Magoo's Magic Emporium, Some Like It Hot, What the Bleep Do We Know, Dirty Pop, which is a 3-part series, Ghostbusters, Funny Girl, Vacation, and I've added one of my all-time favorites, The Princess Bride. Epic movie. Dirty Dancing. Who doesn't like Swayze? Patrick Swayze. I miss the guy. An eternal classic, Forrest Gump, which I think is a great morality play, actually. Field of Dreams. Kevin Costner, one of my favorite actors. And then Slumdog Millionaire. So if y'all could just throw out 2 or 3 names, and I'll try to pick the top 5, or email me so I can get a poll up in a day or 2, and we can take the vote and set the date for the next movie night. All the brain candy films. So, but y'all let me know. I do want your input, because I want to pick something that you'll be interested in and that you'll join us with. The movie nights are we do it on Zoom, so everybody can participate and talk. And it's just kind of a lighthearted night, talking about the movie, what we liked, didn't like, pros, cons, great insights, thoughts, philosophies, bawdy jokes, whatever. It's just a way to get to know and meet some people online and further develop the friendships that we've got on here. It's, oftentimes refer to y'all as a family. And so if you if you're viewing the channel and are interested in getting a little bit more involved with it, consider joining us. And so let me have your suggestions. Princess Bride. Some Like It Hot and Vacation and Funny Girl. Pretty good choices. So the rest of you, get those votes in. Do let us know if something interests you. Thank you, Melissa. Very much appreciate. Appreciate all y'all. I'm going to call it a night, and I think Ellen has as well. So, but on behalf of Ellen, we really appreciate you joining us tonight. We thank you. Our time is up, and we thank you for yours. Y'all have a great week ahead. Hope to see you Tuesday night. Good night.